Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to take a look at price ceilings and price gouging. The question that we ask is, what effects do price ceilings have on economic activity? And to answer this, we're going to look at two real-world examples of rent control and price gouging. Rent control is a price ceiling that applies to the market for apartment rentals, and price gouging laws place a temporary ceiling on the prices that sellers can charge during times of emergency. The question we want to answer is, besides shortages, what are some unintended consequences of rent controls? Remember that shortages occur because our quantity that's demanded is a lot higher than the quantity supplied. If rent control is low, owners have less revenue for maintenance, which means that there's going to be an overall reduction in the quality of apartments. There will be less maintenance or additional decay. And to make a reasonable profit, rent control policies have led to the overall decay of many apartment buildings, meaning the landlords won't fix any issues in an attempt to make back some of that money that they're losing with that price ceiling. Some other unintended consequences of rent controls. A lot of times landlords will try to nickel and dime their tenants with fees that increase their overall revenues. There will be decreases in long-term investment, meaning there will be less new units that are built. And a lot of times, the very people that this policy was intended to help will end up being hurt by the policy. It provides an incentive for people to stay in rent-controlled housing longer than they otherwise would have. Rent-controlled apartments are passed from one generation to the next to remain in the program. And a lot of times, many people that are able to live in these rent-controlled apartments are not actually low income. Another unintended consequence is that the owners of rent-controlled buildings might convert them to other uses, like turn them into condos that they sell or turn them into office space. So even though the policy was intended to help renters, it can actually cause some harm in the long run. This graph is showing us rent control in the short and long run. So in the short run, our quantity demanded in the short run minus our quantity demand or quantity supplied in the short run shows that we have a little bit of a short run shortage, and that's the SR shortage that we see here. This graph looks crazy, but the D and S SR are going to be short run and the D and S LR are going to be long run. In the long run, both supply and demand will become more elastic. So suppliers have more time to adjust and the quantity of apartments supplied will fall. Renters will try to substitute toward renting rent-controlled apartments, so the quantity of apartments demanded will rise, and the shortage will get bigger in the long run. So the long run shortage is going to be bigger than that short run shortage. A practice what you know question. One unintended consequence of rent control is that landlords may not maintain those rental units. So this could be something that they didn't intend to happen because of that price ceiling, but it does in fact end up happening. The next thing we want to take a look at is price gouging laws. So price gouging laws are just temporary price ceilings that are imposed during emergencies. A good example is to imagine that there's a severe hurricane. An uncontrolled market, we want to know how they would deal with an increase in the demand for generators. And in an uncontrolled market, a lot of suppliers would raise those prices so that consumers would have to pay them. Now, it's really important to not confuse price gouging with paying prices that customers think are too high. $10 for a soda at a movie, we often willingly purchase these goods, even if we think they're too expensive. But with this scenario, because of the hurricane, the demand for generators has increases. A lot of people have lost power. At the initial price, there's going to be an excess demand for generators because that price is pretty low and everyone needs one. But the prices act to ration these scarce resources. So with excess demand, that price of the generator will increase. And that means that the available units are distributed to those that value them the most, or that they're able to essentially purchase them and they have the money to do so. This higher price also provides suppliers with an incentive to provide more generators, and that's how markets are supposed to work. But sometimes we have to put temporary price ceilings during emergencies, because with this hurricane or some type of event, when we ask what happens, It's that the prices would be raised so high that people wouldn't be able to afford these generators. So if they were to enforce a mandatory price ceiling temporarily, there would be some unintended consequences of that as well. The direct result of the price gouging law would be a shortage because everybody would go out and buy the generators that were available at that price ceiling. But entrepreneurial activity that could alleviate some of the problems would be reduced. Let's take a look at this graphically. So we have our price per generator on our y-axis and our quantity of generators on the x-axis, and we have our equilibrium point before this disaster. After the disaster, people are demanding a lot more generators than they were before, so the prices go up, and that's going to be what would encourage these suppliers to produce more. Now, if there was a maximum price because of a gouging law, anything in red would be an illegal price and anything in the green would be acceptable. That would create a shortage because suppliers are losing that incentive and the price ceiling is less than the equilibrium price. So overall, instead of the market naturally correcting itself, we would end up with a shortage because of that price gouging ceiling. So let's take a look at a proposal and a counter proposal. In order to protect consumers from excessively high prices, a government will impose a price gouging law on snow shovels, de-icer, and so on during severe winters. On the other end of that coin, in order to protect producers from excessively low prices, a government would impose a price collapsing law on snow shovels, de-icer, etc. during unusually mild winters. So if we looked at these two proposals and we were voting, we would say probably neither of these is a good choice. Even though one might benefit our consumer, we would end up with a shortage. One benefits producers, but then we're going to end up with a surplus. Remember that these market forces should be thought of as impersonal, and we don't want to benefit one or the other specifically. We want to think about what's going to be best overall for the market. Let's think about gasoline prices. When there's a supply disruption, prices for gasoline jump. We get the inevitable local news story at a gas station, and a reporter interviews a customer who blames greedy gasoline companies. They'll say things like they're just trying to gouge us so they can make more profit. But whenever the prices go down, we don't really see news stories that talk about how gasoline's now at low levels and what that's doing to producers. We wonder why there's not a customer thanking gas companies for not putting profits ahead of people. And that's because we typically think about these market forces from a consumer standpoint, but it's important in economics to try to consider it from the consumer and the producer standpoint and know that overall, best case scenario is to not have any ceilings or floors and to let the market naturally course correct. That's going to wrap up this video, but you can head back over to Blackboard to watch the video on price floors. Thank you.